Hello and welcome to Stageworthy. I'm Phil Rickaby, the host and producer of this podcast. Stageworthy is Canada's theatre podcast, and on Stageworthy, I talk to people in Canadian theatre, from actors to directors to playwrights to producers. If they're making theatre in Canada, I'm talking to them. Some of the people I talk to are household names, and the rest are people that I really think you should get to know. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure that you like this episode and leave a comment so I know you were here and tell me what you liked about this episode. And if you like Stageworthy in general, make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so that whenever a new episode comes out, you will get notified that a new episode is available. If you're listening to the audio only version, please make sure you're subscribed. Go to your favorite podcast app, search for Stageworthy and hit the follow button. And if you are already following, especially if you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure that you leave a rating and review, because your ratings and reviews will help new people to find this show. If you want to help me to make this podcast, please go to patreon.com/stageworthy and become a patron. I can't make this show without my backers. And if you want to be one of them, if you want to be one of those people who helps me to make this show, please become a patron. I will talk a little bit more about being a patron at the end of the show, right before I tell you about who my guest is next week. But this week, my guest is Susanna Fournier. Susanna is an award-winning playwright, theater maker, director. Her latest play, Take Rimbaud, is on now at Buddies in Bad Times Theater. It runs until May 23rd at Buddies in Bad Times Theater. I really enjoyed this one, and you get to hear it starting now, because here's my conversation with Susanna Fournier. Susanna Fournier, thank you so much for joining me. As you just said, we're racing from rehearsal to get here in time for this interview. You're in rehearsal for Take Rimbaud. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, Take Rimbaud. That's what we've been saying.
At Buddies of Bad Times, in association with the Howland Company. What is Take Rimbaud?
I mean, I feel like that's a question we're asking ourselves in rehearsal almost every day. But the fun of Take Rimbaud is it is a piece that is inspired from Arthur Rimbaud's kind of iconic prose poem, A Season in Hell, which is like half fever dream, half like diatribe, a bit of a howl. It's this strange piece of writing that really changed the face of French poetry and French literature, and enigmatic. And, I first found it in 2014, and I just saw the title and I was like, well, I relate to that, like A Season in Hell. And the poem tells the story of this young poet who arrives to this banquet of life and then wants to have a revolution, a poetic revolution, and then meets kind of a demon and descends into darkness and madness and debauchery and ends up railing against Europe and history. And you go on this sort of fast feral journey through language and pop out at the other side. And Rimbaud has quit poetry and renounces art. And that was his sort of swan song. And so when I picked up the text, I was like, who is this person? He wrote this at 19. He quit poetry by 21. And yet Rimbaud has become this icon for punk rock, Patti Smith, a lot of iconoclast artists. And so I was like, I relate hugely to the story of a young artist coming to the scene, being like, let's kick it up a notch, and then hitting the reality of the art industry and money and rent and growing up and all these things. So I just couldn't believe how relatable the poem felt to my own experience of graduating theater school and coming to Toronto and wanting to, fuck shit up and then kind of encountering that first series of potential heartbreak or disillusionment or disenchantment that we can have as young artists when we realize how hard it is. And yeah. Stop.
No, I mean, I think the idea of being a young artist that just wants to fuck some shit up is, I think in some theater schools that gets kind of wrung out of you. It's hard to hold on to, because it can be so rigid what they're preparing you for, especially when I went to theater school. I'm an old man, so it was very regimented.
Yeah.
about like your career is going to be, we're preparing you to go to Stratford or Shaw, you'll audition there, that's
Right.
going to be your career, and you
Yeah.
don't fuck shit up when that's your goal. But you kind of had we learned very quickly out of theater school that very few of us were going to do that, and the
Yeah.
rest of us had to figure out how to fuck shit up.
Yeah. And invent, I just gave a talk at TMU to a bunch of graduating students, and I was like, you're going to have to invent your career and you're going to have to keep discovering who you are because creative people are creative in many ways. And I myself went through an acting program, but even inside of that was like, oh, why is this scene this way? And should we stage it this way? Like I was one of those annoying actors that was sort of questioning the story, the text, the writing, the staging, and eventually ended up, now primarily I work on the other side. I'm the writer, or I'm the director, or I'm the creative producer. And so a part of us, when I wanted to do a theatricalization of Take Rimbaud was also like, can we as theater artists use some of the same techniques Rimbaud used as a poet to disrupt how we understand theater as a form or that rigidity you speak of? Like, can we blow open a play like the same way he blew open verses and structure and so that became an instruction for me is like, how do I use this sense of disruption or, you know, how do we fuck shit up as a play's actually happening? So when we say like, what is Take Rimbaud, we're constantly like trying to see if we can do this experiment of like, can we put a form of theater on stage and then like mutate it or blow it up or break the play?
I mean, it is so hard to do that. Again, it comes back to like fucking shit up in the industry when I think a lot of times people feel like they can't, right?
Yeah.
Like, get somebody who's about to criticize a theater company or like critique something, and the first thing they do is they do that shoulder check to see who might be around because you gotta do. People are afraid of saying the wrong thing. There's a politeness, but almost a fearful politeness sometimes in the industry of trying to keep things. Those companies are very powerful, and if I piss them off, I'm not going to work with them again. And
Totally.
they don't. I think the perception is that a lot of theater companies don't sit well with discomfort.
Yeah. And I think, this is something the play actually speaks directly to is like, what has happened to the idea of artistic risk in this country, in this moment? Like, I think everyone becomes so afraid that like, oh my gosh, we're not going to sell tickets. We got to do something familiar and comforting and or feel good, or we're coming out of a pandemic. Like people need happy stories. And yet what does that mean for advancing the art form or like defining what it means to make an art about right now? And also people have become, I think, so afraid to say or do the wrong thing because of everyone has a phone, everyone's, sort of kind of quietly surveilling each other. You don't want to end up a meme, you don't want to end up canceled, you don't want to say the wrong thing. And so I think we've culturally and socially gone towards like, I'll just do what I know and I'll just do what everyone else is doing. But that makes for really boring experiences at the theater. Because it's like we're like, oh, I'm seeing a play that I've seen already 1,000 times.
Yeah, yeah. I remember, during the pandemic, in that summer of 2020, when all the theaters were putting up their black squares and talking about how they're going to fundamentally change the way they do everything, and then a certain number of them, when they announced their first seasons back and things started to go back to normal, it was basically, well, we don't need that anymore because that's
Right.
over.
Yeah.
We could stop dealing with that, and they just sort of ignored the fact that they said they were going to change things. You know?
Yeah, because change is like, as you said, like change involves like a lot of discomfort and it involves a lot of like, I don't maybe know yet. Like we're confronting this all the time in rehearsal. Like we did our first week of rehearsal and I, of course, like silly me was like, this draft's pretty good. Like I feel pretty solid about this. And at the end of the first week, I was like, oh, I need to rewrite like this whole section. Oh, because now we're getting it on its feet. And so we've built these economic rehearsal processes that are like, okay, you got 2 weeks to rehearse the text, you slam it into tech for a week and boom. And that works if you're doing a certain kind of piece. But if you're actually experimenting in the room, if you're trying something, you need to have that room for, oh, that didn't work. Okay, cool. We really committed to that choice. We tried it, we rehearsed it, and it actually doesn't work at all. And now we need the new thing. And so that takes time and it takes courage and it takes everyone, whether it's the theater company or the artist, being willing to sit in that place of like, I don't know yet.
Yeah.
And not uncomfortable.
Oh, 100%. I remember I had a good friend of mine, Richard Bone, great director, has a habit of, you'll ask a question about the play when you're sitting down. He's like, I don't know yet. And as actors, you're always like, but you're the director, you're supposed to know all the things. And what he was trying to get us to do was like just give in to the fact that we were going to discover it on our feet and in the room and like figure this stuff out. And it was uncomfortable to sit with not knowing until we figured it out. Yeah, then you get to
Totally.
the point where you're like, I understand now, I trust this process, but
Yeah.
so much resistance to the director saying I don't know yet when we were getting
Yeah.
started.
Well, I love that you bring like trust into it also because we were talking about this like a lot this week because the text now is I'm starting to understand it more. Ted is understanding it a bit more. And now the actors are kind of that we're shifting that discomfort of like, okay, we kind of know what it is now. And now letting the actors also be in that vulnerable place of, oh, I'd have to get vulnerable. Like now I have to just have stakes, want things that are uncomfortable to want, be willing to show a character desperately wanting something, and no one wants to be witnessed being, like, desperately in pursuit of something they want. So, we we're chasing around a lot, like, when is the writing hiding from being vulnerable? Okay, that's on me. Like, when is the production hiding? And so we're, like, kind of, like, how do you build up that sense of, like, "Okay, now I just have to be vulnerable," and that's actually how I figure it out, and that's how we get to that place of knowing is by risking not knowing.
Vulnerability is so difficult, and it's the thing that as artists we're supposed to be, and yet it's so, again, uncomfortable to do it, to,
Yeah.
like, walk into a room and metaphorically take your clothes off, or depending on the show, sometimes really take your clothes
Yeah,
off.
we're
But,
fortunate.
like,
Yeah.
it's the kind of thing where you're just trying to figure out, like, you have to wear your heart on your sleeve and just be in a world where that's not something that we do outside of the rehearsal hall.
No. No. And I think too with this play, like it's about artists. It's about that dream, that thing that made us fall in love with art. It's about wanting to be creative and wanting your art to come out into the world and the pain of like when you can't get that production or when you've been working on that draft or when you have writer's block. And so it content that's very close to home for all of us in the room. And it's asking us to bear a part of ourselves in the production that you're like, oh, but only my friends see that, or only I see that, or only, like it's heartbreaking when you desperately want a part and you don't even get an audition, or you do get an audition and, like it's heartbreaking when the reality of the stakes that artists have or talk about, you know,
Oh, we don't talk about it much at all. No, no.
because it's like not cool. It's like, but it's a lot of people's like, no, this is who I am. This is what I do in the world. Like, this is why I exist. So the stakes are actually like quite
The
high.
stakes are so high, and it's like, yes, this is the thing I'm passionate about, but you're trying to be too cool about not caring about it, but, like, what you really wanna do is, like, scream about the writer's block, or the scene isn't working, or the rehearsal didn't go well, or I didn't get the part, all of those things, but you just gotta,
Yeah.
like, put a lid on it and just sort of be like, I can't show that."
Yeah, yeah, like, and so this, I love obviously, I have my own pain of being an artist, and I'm surrounded by artists, and I love artists, and, Rimbaud, we're looking at that also the heartbreak of art and the difference between your creativity, but also the art industry, and so the play also looks at how much economics, like, dictates what an artist is allowed to do. Like we're in this moment where, AI is like, okay, I'll just replace locations, I'll replace backgrounds, I'll replace actors, like, and so we're in like, what kind of art do we need for this moment at a time when also people are saying like, oh, like you're not essential. Like we don't really need art. We're actually, we need art so desperately to try to make sense of what, how the heck we're going to get out of this mess we've made.
The thing that have been sort of rolling around in my brain about the whole AI thing is there's industries where it's displacing people. And they're like, people are like, oh, they're trying to make an AI actor, and they haven't been very successful at it yet because
No,
they're terrible. But
they're
they
bad.
keep trying, and at some point that may happen. There's
Yeah.
two things that I think about there, and one is that audiences like to connect with the person off screen. And if that person does not exist off screen, it is difficult for them to connect with it.
Yeah, I never thought about that.
On the other side, they can do all they want with on screens, but theater is the one place they can only always be organic. You cannot replace the actors in the theater with AI. Everybody is in that room breathing together.
Yeah.
And so theater becomes actually more essential, more vital, and more exciting in a world where AI is replacing actors and artists on screens.
I know, I kind of find it fascinating that there's now this idea of like, oh, theater is going to become this new prestige art form because of the novelty of it being real people in real time. And like, I'm all for anything that gets more people to see theater. And I think my question inside of that is, okay, but still, like, what then? What are we? What do we mean when we say theater? Do we mean a well-made play? Do we mean American naturalism? Do we mean German expressionism? Do we mean the in-your-face movement from Britain? And so for my work and also what Tate Rimbaud explores is like, what is the form of theater? Like what are all the different forms of theater and how can we use form to tell a story in a different way or to turn a story on its head or to disrupt the audience from what they expect. You know, audiences are kind of used to like, I'm going to go, I'm going to be a voyeur. And we're like, what if you're not? Like, what if the play doesn't behave? What if we keep surprising, and Tate Rimbaud asks us to look at like, how much do we give in to the momentum of history or the momentum of the narrative, right? And like, or we choose the path of least resistance in our lives, in art, in our career path. Like what happens if we go like, actually, this story doesn't work for me anymore? What story do we put in our place, or how do we become the authors of our story rather than just sort of like, I don't know, my life just kind of happened, or, capitalism just kind of happened, or, housing prices are insane, like what is, what is our agency really inside how we define the story we're going to live out in our lives?
Yeah.
You know,
One of the things that I think that always there's a thing about theater where it 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 you cannot really be complacent. You are not quite a voyeur in that space because it's not like watching a movie or watching TV. Everybody's in the
yes.
room, and
Yeah.
you know what? You could stand up and you could start shouting at the stage, right? That can happen. Somebody could
Totally.
stand up and walk out and make a big deal. Somebody could yell at the stage. They could throw things. Like, these are all things that could happen because we're all in the
Yeah.
room, and there's a certain tension that exists because of that, and I think that it belies complacency. You cannot just sit back in the theater. I mean, sure, maybe if you've seen Grease for the 50th time, maybe, but
Totally.
generally, it's a very difficult thing to just sort of, like, sit back and just, like, watch a play that you're not really engaged with.
Yeah. Well, you're speaking to like, for me, that's my understanding of theater is that contract, right? Like I have said like, watch this, and you said, okay. And now we've created the relationship of theater. Whether or not we're in a theater or anything doesn't really matter, but I'm interested always as a writer is like, what's possible inside of that relationship, which doesn't mean I'm going to be like, get on stage, do something you're not. But what happens when we draw awareness to that relationship, to that delicate, active participation? And then what's possible if we start to, again, like fuck with it, change it, shift it. Not that we're like, Ted, the director, always says like, oh, I'm always worried if the art's going to start participating at me or, kind of force me into a participation. But even just drawing awareness to, as you said, like, we're both here. We're both active in this moment does something different to that relationship and reminds us of our agency as audience. And that's something I am in a lot of my work is interested in looking at that relationship also for a symbol of our relationship as citizens, our relationship as people living in a community.
Yeah. It's a fascinating thing. I've done a couple of solo shows and I've seen a few solo shows in my time. And the moment when, if the actor chooses to look at the audience and like, you're my scene partner, which sometimes they do. My favorite ones are when they do, it changes everything in the room when the actor is like looking at the audience. Because that third wall, that fourth wall does not exist. And there's a connection that's made and it's a magical thing where it's like, oh, you see me,
Yeah.
and it sort of breaks down that wall, you know?
And it's such a scary thing, like, in some of my shows, because I love direct address, and, like, I'll often have, sections of a play that almost feel like a TED Talk. Like, we've kind of departed a bit from character and we're exploring and or characters working through an idea. But I'll say, like, when the characters are talking to the audience, they are actually doing that. They are not pretending or, like, looking to the horizon. And that takes a certain kind of vulnerability, again, from the actor and confidence to not dress it up, to be like, it's going to be powerful enough if I just ask you this question.
Yeah. And it's hard to know, like, right? Because sometimes the actor can feel like, no, I have to be doing something, right? I can't
Yeah.
just like ask the question. I need to do something. But the more impactful thing can just be to like let the words do it.
Yeah. Well, we talk a lot, like, in our rehearsal, there's, a lot of my work has, like, okay, I'll start with, like, too many ideas, like, a lot going on, and the process for me is always moving towards that simplicity and finding the most powerful line or the most powerful gesture. If I can cut a line because an actor can do it, like, amazing, right? Like, let's have less words. And moving towards trusting, the power of that one line or that one look, or just that the actor takes a step closer. And that's when I have the most fun as a writer in a room, because storytelling isn't just words. It's all of the accumulative design elements of theater. It's in where they're standing on the stage. Like, everything you do on stage tells a story. And so it's like, is that the story we're telling? Or is it more like this? Oh, we need to go here. And I think that's what I love about being in rehearsal, especially with a new text, is that you get that opportunity to really refine the words and the story down to its most potent elements. And we're doing a lot of that in Tape Rimbaud. And because I've worked on this play for 12 years with the Howland Company, it has had probably the most draft of anything I have written. And it got, like, way out there. It had a whole section when it went on this, like, economic lecture, and there was, like, weird, like just mashing together tons of ideas, because I was also looking for, how do we connect these ideas of, like, what is hell, right? If it's called a season in hell, well, what is hell? Is hell, let's not go to a Christian place with it, but, like, for me, I was like, well, I don't know. Hell feels like being an artist. Like, this feels like hell. Writing feels like hell. Trying to pay my rent feels like hell. And we've ended up realizing that we've created this coming of age story because we started working on it when we were those fresh emerging artists, asking these big questions, railing against the machine, like, huge ideas. And now, like, Howland Company is a group of artists over the last, 12, 15 years have cut their teeth. They're like producers. We've all developed. We were just all older, and we've lived through things and we've had our hearts broken and we've learned skills. And so it's really amazing at this moment to look back on this work and see our own development inside of it. And also, like, the work, I think as artists mature too, they get simpler. Like, there's less of a need to, like, prove yourself. And so it's amazing working on this piece, which acts as kind of this love letter to, like, Toronto 2014 to now. in terms of like the indie art scene and kind of the different moments and intensities that have taken place.
I'm curious about how this play came to the Howland Company, how Ted Witzel came into it. Like, how did all of these people come together for this play? Did you bring the play to Howland? How did it happen?
It started it started really through, like, conversations and kind of really in that sense of scrappy artists looking for opportunities, and I remember meeting the Howland Company because I knew Adrian Morningstar and some of the original founding members, and they were like, "We're having a launch, we're starting a theater company," which, like, every person who graduated theater school is like, "I'm gonna start a theater company." And they actually did, and they stuck with it, which is super impressive. But they invited me to the launch party, and when I met that like Hallie and Cam and Courtney and Ruth and Paulo, and they were talking about like, well, we want plays for like big casts, and we want plays for young people because they were, well, we're still young, we're still young. But it kind of came to be, like, over a snack table, to be honest, because I was reading Rimbaud at the time, and I was like, "Oh, well, I wanna write a pl I'm kinda working on this weird thing, but it could have a large cast." And so they said, "Oh, do you wanna come read some scenes?" And we were just kind of looking for s they were looking for stuff to work on, I was looking to test these ideas. So it started in this workshop place, and at first, I was just workshopping it with them for a couple months, and it allowed me to write a first draft. And then around the same time, I had met Ted, who was working on Lulu at Buddy's, and he and I fell into a collaboration. And then through that, I said, "Well, you might want to come hear this play." And he said, "Well, this is really weird and probably unstageable. Sure, I'm in." And we would kind of work on it and then go away and work on other stuff for a year, 2 years, and then come back, and so it was very on and off, but all the work we were doing in between, whether it was Lulu or Caroline and Casimir or punk rock for Howland, we were kind of just figuring out who we are as artists, and then after I produced The Empire, which was in 2018, 2019, I was, like, very tired of theater and I kind of took a break, and then the pandemic hit and everyone took a break. And when Ted was then appointed to the artistic director of Buddies, I thought, "Hey, if there's any theater in Toronto that it makes sense to do this play at, it's Buddies. We should start a conversation with Howland." And so we just decided to have a reading. And I had written a new draft, and we all thought like, wow, it's at that point 10 years later, and I decided to make it a period piece at that point. And it just felt like all the puzzle pieces had arrived in the right place, and that we all had the skills both aesthetically and the producing structure to make something like this happen.
I do love that Ted's reaction was, "I think this is unstageable. We should do this."
We should do it. I mean, that's a common reaction to a lot of my work. And yeah, I think like Ted and my collaboration, like he and Leora Morris were some of the biggest champions of the Empire. And it wasn't really until I met him and I handed him my 3 plays that he was the person who was like, "Wow, these are weird, and I think they should actually be weirder, not less weird." And so he gave me like read some Buchner and read Hamlet Machine and opened up the possibility that I was actually wanting to work with theatrical form in a way that not a lot of Canadian theaters do, and not a lot of our playwrights necessarily do, or at least the ones that I had been experiencing. And so he opened my eyes up to like role models and artistic heroes that I could kind of go, like, what are they doing there? And it means that there's a stronger relationship in my work between the text and the production, which is why when Ted and I work together, I'm very active in the rehearsal hall and our process is very collaborative, and he's very patient when I'm like, what is happening? Like it's that, but if the lights do that, then it means this. And so we have a very holistic approach, but we have that similar desire for really ambitious art, because I think what I'm most excited by in this theater is not necessarily if something succeeds, but that it reaches for something that I haven't seen before.
Yeah. You mentioned being in the rehearsal hall. You came from rehearsal. I'm curious what your role is in the rehearsal hall as the playwright of this play, and how does that differ in this play than in previous works you've produced?
I think it's a lot more active in this process. I find every time, because I work with form, every time I write a play, it's a very different process. Like, I don't know where I'm necessarily going. And then every time I rehearse a play, it's sometimes the texts need a lot of changing in the room and sometimes they don't. It kind of depends how I've structured the piece and how much we're relying on character and action. And also depends on if some of my texts I direct. And so then it's sort of a streamlined process. But in this piece, the first week was definitely testing the draft as it went into rehearsal, because I had not yet heard that draft like out loud very many times. Always I think of draft as overwritten, like going into rehearsal, like across the board, it's always got too many words. But what we've discovered in this process, we're working with a lot of theatrical layers. So we have kind of our adaptation, like Season in Hell frame. And then we have our heroes, which are our characters, Paul Verlaine, like characters inspired by Paul Verlaine, Rimbaud, inspired by Sylvia Plath, inspired by Sappho. So we have our hero characters. And then we have the structure of like a memory play. And that's all fine. And that's kind of easy to rehearse. And then it starts to explode. And so certain layers pop on. Certain layers are like, now I'm going over here. And so feeling out how the text is changing form and then how we're going to stage that and then what that means and what it does to the audience is really complicated.
Yeah. It's funny you were mentioning about how the tendency to overwrite a text, and I do that all the time, and I hate removing things. It's so hard to sometimes to remove things. And so what I would sometimes do is like, okay, this first draft, I'm writing with pen and paper. I will never overwrite if I write with pen and paper.
Oh,
Only
that's
only
important.
when I'm typing, I can write forever, but my hand gets tired.
Totally.
So I would do that, and because much easier for me to add to a text than to start
Oh my
killing
gosh.
babies, you know what I mean?
That's wow. I love I'm gonna steal that. It is really hard. It is really hard to slash a whole scene or to, be like, wow, what a beautiful monologue. I don't need any of it. Um
Heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking,
Heartbreaking.
right? Like, that could have been 6 hours just crafting that scene. That could have been a whole weekend. You could have had any sort of emotional revelation. Like, I also find when I'm writing theater, all of the characters, like, goals and loves and wishes and fears are coursing through my body, because I'd have to kind of embody, and I'm trained as an actor as well, and you are too, but it's like I go inside of that POV and I live that, but from all sides, right? So I always love every character because I equally fought for them in my heart, and so then when you get attached, like, oh, that's such a great joke, or that's such a great line, but ultimately, if it's gonna weaken, it's writing is not for you, it's for the audience, right? So
I know. And that's the tragic part of it, right? Because you
so
might spend 6 hours and you love all of these characters. I'm working on something right now, and 2 of the characters are terrible. They're horrible, but I love them so much.
awesome.
They're hilarious, but terrible, and you hate them, but you love them, and I just, like, how do you like, you have to just, like, let them cook on the page, you know?
Yeah. I think, like, we all, after the first week of rehearsal, I had a lot of rewriting to do. We had 2 days off, and I probably spent about 10 to 12 hours both days with all the pages on the floor, just, like, thinking through and making, like, slashes, and And Ted is an amazing dramaturg, and the Howland Company and our cast are so generous, and they're all incredible artists. There's a lot of really smart writers in the room as well. I love it when I can be like, does someone else know what the better line is? Just give it, like, just help me, like, or do you want to try something there? Like, I think that line is wrong. Can you just feed me your impulse? Because you do get pretty tired when you're in every day, like, analyzing the writing. So I always feel like it's hard to get feedback. Like, it's always hard. It's hard if you're acting, it's hard if you're writing, it's hard if you're the director. But when you're inside of something, you do not have the same perspective as the other people who are watching you be inside of it.
Yeah.
And so I know that, like, when Ted is watching the writing and he gives me dramaturgical advice, that I'm like, cool, I'll just go home and, like, slash my pen down that page that I love. He's not doing it because what is on the page is bad. He's doing it because we have learned that this moment needs to be this.
Yeah. Yeah.
In order to make the whole thing, come to life in the same way, when you first take a pass at a scene as an actor, it's like, what am I doing? And, like, you make a choice and you think it's really good. And then the director's like, yeah, it's not that.
I mean, we've all made
Really?
that choice at a rehearsal hall. The important thing is that the room is like forgiving enough that everybody can go, that was a bad choice. We don't need to worry
Yeah.
about that anymore. We can move on.
Yeah, or you're like, I just need to try it again in order to know it's not that. And I think that goes back to the vulnerability, but also I love the revision process of writing is so different than the first draft generation of a text. And I always think the other one is better. It's like, I wish I was just writing a first draft where it doesn't matter and no one's going to read it. But I think if Izzy Jim, I always let myself have Rick be like, oh, it's not done,
Yeah.
like,
I mean, I want it to be done, right? It's like, I love when
I
it's
didn't
done.
write it perfectly.
Yeah. No.
Oh, okay.
But it's always
Yeah,
that
and
moment of like, the fun part is often like the fun part is like the discovery, the writing that first draft, and you're learning, you're figuring out who are the characters and all this sort of stuff. That's fun. And then you have to make sense of it. You have to sit down. That's work. It's like the first draft is just the fun. You're at the playground, and then you have to
yeah,
do the work, which is a lot less fun sometimes.
it can be a lot less fun. It can be a lot more frustrating. You can hit those walls of, like, I don't know what it is and I need to know what it is because we open in 6 days, or, like, because the lighting had been built around this thing. And I think that's why, like, this kind of process, you really have to be working with a team of artists like the Howland Company, like Ted, like the cast members that we have, because they know what it is to be inside of a new play, and a new play that is working with form in an experimental, in an ambitious way, so that tolerance for that discomfort is something that everyone's like, it's not their first rodeo.
I mean, the thing about buddies is that, we've talked a couple of times about discomfort and how that can sometimes go away in some theater environments. So buddies at bad times does not shy away from discomfort. And in fact,
No.
often in a lot of the work embraces discomfort. Could this play would I mean, obviously I think the answer is obviously no, but like if this play didn't have a home at Buddies, what would be its future?
I mean, it's hard to know. I think right now, like, I worry all the time that I'm setting my playwriting career on fire with this play, because I'm like, there's some hard critiques of, like, risk averse programming, what we have allowed as audiences, how art is not striving. We're living in this place of, like, every movie's a remake. Like we're in this cultural moment of, like, what? And so I think those are questions that we need to ask on stage. Like, I think we need to ask, what are we doing here on stage? And I think we need to, a part of me was like, I want to take all the conversations I hear people having in the art scene and I want to put them on stage. So that's where I'm like, I don't know if I have a career. I don't know if any theater will program me. in the same way that Rimbaud was like, what is happening to poetry? What is this art form right now? So if it weren't for Buddies, I don't know that this play in 2026 in Toronto as it is right now would happen anywhere other than, let's say, like a Summer Works or, a more indie, independent collective. But what I love about what Buddies is doing is that they're also saying, like, no, this play needs a resourced theater. This play you can't strike this play in 15 minutes. And that's something that I always found really challenging as a young writer, is that my only options seemed to be like a Summer Works or a Next Stage. But that really limits the scope of what you can do in terms of production and design, because you're like, oh, I got to fit in that set in that 2x2 square. It's got to come down in 10.
Hmm.
Not that those aren't amazing vehicles for new artists trying out ideas, but like, I am an artist who I love vision and scale, and I love design. And, I think about the most transformative moments for me in a theater usually aren't even like dialogue. It's like, oh man, and then it went purple and it started snowing and there was that music and So I really want to make work that feels epic and like a rock concert and dreamlike and really leans into what the magic of atmosphere that theater can do. And Buddies is a very adventurous place to do that, because the audience is expected.
Yeah. It was funny you're mentioning the how sometimes it's a moment that isn't dialogue that sticks with you. And that is so true. I remember when I saw Kim's Convenience at Fringe the first time, and the last moment is just like the son with the pricing gun. And it was the most
Yeah.
moving thing I'd seen at Fringe that year. And it was like,
Yeah.
there's no dialogue there. This is just a moment. And it's perfect. And those are so powerful.
Yeah, because if the story has worked its way, if we created that momentum and created those stakes, then giving those payoffs is also something that we're working on right now in rehearsal. Is like, okay, well, we still introduce the audience to these characters and these relationships, and there's a love triangle, and will they, won't they, and all of those delicious reasons that we watch people. So how do we also pay off, make good on our promises that we've introduced you to these people that we want you to care about, but also subvert your expectations of what you're watching.
Yeah.
And that's such a fun challenge for us in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you were talking just a second ago about how, the critique of the industry and that sort of thing that comes into there. And it's a weird
Yep.
thing, because I was talking earlier about the shoulder check when you're about to say something critical about a theater or an organization. And yet, by having these conversations, like, these are the conversations we have when we care about a thing,
Yeah.
right? Like, we wouldn't have the conversations if we didn't love or find it important to have the conversation. And yet sometimes we fear that, like, by having the conversation, we're like blacklisting ourselves. But we're the one, when we are so passionate about wanting the industry and the thing to be so much better. It's a weird tightrope walk.
It's such a weird tightrope. And for me, I think I it's this weird paradox where I love the theater's ability to cut right to the truth of something, but it does that through a fake thing. Like, it does that through illusion. And I think, I'm not necessarily interested in just being like, theater sucks, or what the heck is going on, or it's like, it's what you said. It's like, because we care. Like, because I care so deeply about this art form, and everyone else if you're still doing theater, like, you're not doing it for the money.
No.
You're not doing it for the money, but you're doing it because at one time theater changed your life. It changed you in somehow.
Yeah.
It, like, showed you something. It offered you something that the world had not yet offered you.
Yeah.
And so how do we fight for theater to still do that and not just become a movie on stage, or to not have so many artists feel like they can't try something
Yeah.
because no one's trying something,
Yeah.
right? Or they're like, oh, I have to do it I remember writing one of my first plays in the trilogy, and I wrote a sentence, and I thought, oh, I can't do that because that's going to be too expensive. And I was like, why is that
Mm.
limiting? Or I can't write this play because you can't do it at a festival. You can't do it at Fringe. So therefore I can't write. Like, is that what we're teaching a new generation of artists? That, you better write that show that's going to get programmed. Well, one, what is that show?
What's funny, that's one of the things that, as somebody who's self-produced, it's in the back of your head, and you almost have to take it, throw it away, because if you're the writer, that's not your problem.
Not your
You know,
problem.
you just
Yeah.
write the thing. Somebody else has to figure out how to put it on the stage, right? Um,
Yeah.
I was in a very lo-fi silent film style play where we had a train chase on top of a train, and we were like, "How are we going to do this? I don't know. We'll have to figure it out." And we came up with the most
Yeah.
lo-fi way of doing it that was so effective. So, like, those kinds of
Yeah.
constraints make so much brilliance.
Well, and because theater is unlike film, it is a place that operates on metaphor, right? We're back to that symbolic relationship of like, you watch and I'm gonna transform the world. And you can pick up an object that's a chair and go like, this is a castle, right? We're in a town. You can just cast a spell and change the rules of reality. And I think that's why theater is essential. That's why we need theater, because we need to solve problems with our imagination.
100%. It's the difference between, if somebody goes to a movie, they'll come with, the special effects weren't great, but like, here we are
Yeah.
on stage. And like you said, they're gonna be like, this chair is a castle. And everybody in the audience
Yeah.
goes, that chair is a castle.
Yeah, or you pick up a weird finger puppet and you're like, "This is my dad."
Yeah.
And you're like, "That's his
That's his
dad."
dad.
And
Everybody
we
just
do
goes
that.
with it. And it's this
Yeah,
wonderful suspension of disbelief that we only have in the theater now.
yeah. And that's why I like that for me is why theater is so essential, because we are moving culturally to a place where critical thinking is going down, imagination is going down, attention spans are going down. And yet attention span, imagination, and creativity are the things that allow us to solve problems. They allow us to solve problems in our relationships, in our world, in our environment. And so, like, I'm fighting hard for we have to look at also painful truths. We have to build a tolerance for leaning into risk and not just choosing the safe thing. And I don't I kind of say like I don't feel that I have anything to lose as a playwright by offering this, because my work isn't necessarily like, oh, I'm gonna lose that Mervish show. I don't work in the commercial realm.
So few of
So
us do. Like, not many of us are writing the next big budget musical. So that's not going to be on Mervish's radar.
yeah, and it's not anything against folks who are like, I want to make these commercial big hits, but for me, it's like I'm interested in theater that is asking us to think about the here and the now and feel the here and the now, not just distract us. And so this, like, Take Rimbaud is entertaining. I love making people laugh. I love laughter is such a powerful tool, but it's like we can do both. We can feel into these characters and we can ask big questions about where society is.
Yeah. We have to do both. That's what makes it not slapstick. It's not just a short film. It's not
Yeah.
if it's a comedy, we need the drama. If it's a drama, we need the comedy. We can't do all one thing.
Yeah. And theater is that space where, as you said, like it's now so powerful when people come together in the same room. We put our phones away and we are asked to be together and witness something.
Yeah.
And like, it sounds weird to say, but we're losing our ability to even do that.
I think the good thing is that theaters are kind of an enforced space where that happens. Even in movie
Yeah.
theaters, occasionally somebody pulls out their phone and very quickly people are like, "You gotta put that thing away." But
Yeah.
in the theater, doesn't happen as much. People are more likely to have their phone away.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I find, and the thing that gets me about theater, is like those moments that don't really happen in movies quite as much. where the audience goes completely silent because they're all holding their
Yes.
breath because there's a moment on stage that's happening and people are
Yeah.
leaning forward and everybody is just like so tense. And it doesn't happen in the same way in film. It only happens in theater. And that moment will
Yeah.
happen and then everybody exhales together. And those
Yeah.
moments are so magical that I think we chase those.
We do chase those, and I think it's but, you know, this show asks a big question, like, it's asking us, like, what is the value of beauty and feeling and catharsis and art? As is this a form of resistance against ugliness, against, dehumanization? And so it's asking, like, if we're turned into this world where everything is valued through an economic lens, which it's like this play is kind of rejecting. It offers a rejection of that being the way that we offer something value. And so there's this tension moving through the play, and Rimbaud is really championing we need beauty. It's not actually a luxury item. It's not, it is essential. And that moment you speak of, that awe moment where we feel and are a part of something that is bigger than ourselves. Because it's the fact that we are in a collective room and we are all having this experience together is actually what makes it powerful,
Yeah.
more powerful than if we had it by ourselves. And that's what, we're in the rehearsal process, we're aware of, like, okay, how do we build to where are those moments and how can they happen? And to compose that not just through text, but also through the design, through the music, and offer, hopefully, what we're striving to is offer that moment of, I saw something bigger than myself. I saw something I can't see on TV. I was a part of something that I couldn't get anywhere else but the theater.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Susanna, I would like to sort of change gears a little bit. I want to talk a little bit more about less about take Rimbaud and more about yourself as an artist. How did you first discover theater and how did you figure out that it was a thing that you wanted to do?
I think my first experiences of theater as a kid were probably pantomimes, like at local theaters. I spent a lot of my childhood in Nelson, BC, and we had a regional theater there, and there was always a Christmas show, like a Christmas panto. And I always liked going, but that was the only version of theater I had really seen. And then they did a March break theater camp, and me and my friends signed up, and it kind of just felt like playing with my friends because we played a lot of dress up and make believe, which looking back, I was like, oh, I was just doing theater all the time. And we would adapt fairy tales and put them on. And to me, that just felt like playing. And then we moved to Markham when I was about 14. And I ended up seeing a movie version of Daniel McIver and Daniel Brooks' House.
I know the one you're talking about. I rented it on, I guess, VHS at the time
Yes.
because
Yeah.
I missed seeing it in the theater and I was like, I read it and I was like, this I have to see.
Yeah. So it was weird because I was watching a VHS of a movie about a play, which takes place very much in the theater. So one question I had was like, wait, you can make a play like that? And also you can make a movie about a play like that? And that made me curious because I'd never seen theater do that. And that's a very clear example of, like, they break the fourth wall. They talk about the fact that they're doing a play. And I was like, what is this trickery? And because I had just moved to Markham, I ended up auditioning for Unionville High School, which had a regional arts program at the time. And I thought I was going to go do the painting, like the visual art course. But I was like, I'm kind of curious, like they have a drama program. Like, can we just go and sit in on the info session? And in the info session, I think like some grade 11 students did a scene from Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Just like a while, like, and then someone did a clown turn. And I was like, I'm just kind of curious. So I auditioned, but I didn't, like, I wasn't one of those kids that was like, I want to be an actor or I want to do this. I think I was just always kind of doing it. And I got into that program and I really enjoyed it. And it was really my lifeline through high school and coming out of high school. I wasn't sure if I was going to go the way of creative writing or theater school. So I kind of applied to both. And I ended up getting into the acting program at National Theatre School of Canada. So I went there, but I was still developing my writing at the same time. I was really actively pursuing both. And that's, yeah. And then when I graduated, I came to Toronto and I really had my post theater school identity crisis and suddenly went from doing the thing I loved every day, 6 days a week, to like serving in a restaurant and not knowing how to be a person. And I ended up doing an internship with Nightwood Theatre, and that really plugged me into playwriting, and I felt I felt interested in how I intuitively had these questions when it came to writing that seemed to be helpful. And I thought I should ask myself these questions. But yeah, I really pursued acting and writing for simultaneously for about 17 years.
It's funny you're talking about that crisis after graduating from theater school, which I think anybody who's gone through theater school has experienced that. Because I don't know about you, but they spend a lot of time talking about we're going to tear you down and then we're going to build you up. And they spend a lot of time tearing us down, and they spent zero time building us back
And
up.
1 week building us up, no. And they're not allowed to they're not allowed to do that
I
anymore, but
know, I know, and that is good. The some of the changes that I'm seeing in the theater schools are
yeah,
good for everyone, because
yeah,
that whole
yeah,
psychological torture of tearing down and building back up
no.
is horrible.
It's horrible. I teach a lot of acting now, and I teach at theater schools, and I'm very like, I just always go like, "What do I wish I had been taught?" And I don't wanna discredit I had really amazing teachers, but sometimes I'm like, "How can I save these students time?" Like
Well, I mean, it's the thing of like a lot of times, especially, when I was in theater school in the early 90s, I felt like a lot of the teachers were teaching me the way that they were taught. And that's just the way
yeah,
we do it. I was taught this way, and this is how we teach.
yeah,
And there was
yeah,
no questioning of like why that we're taught that way.
yeah.
Why does it feel borderline like torture or like
Yeah,
an
it was
abusive relationship?
whiplash. Are
Yeah.
we getting whiplash? But I think what you said too is like the model was like we're training actors to go to these conservatory like we're training actors in a very specific way. And I was at NTS in the early 2000s, and my cohort, I feel like Sherry D was running the school at the time, and she was really taking creative people. And a lot of people of her kind of generation have gone on to be directors, writers. So I think she was also aware that in Canada, like, you're probably not gonna just get hired by the festival. Like, the
The odds are against that happening.
the least amount of actors will actually
Yes,
be,
yeah.
a lot of you will go into film and TV, or, if you're gonna be in Canadian theater, it's because you're a creator. Like, I think we're a much more creator-driven industry than, I don't know,
Yeah.
London.
No, but we are, because it's a different model here, and I don't know what it's like in London in the UK, but here, if you're going to have any kind of career, you have to learn how to produce your work. You have to learn how to
Yes.
put
Yeah.
something on, and that is not something that was even on the radar when I was in theater school. Nobody was talking about self-producing, and I know
No.
they are now, but man, it was a long time coming.
It took a long time, like, I was really mad as a young playwright that I was like, "What do you mean I have to put up my own show?" Like, I'm still mad about that, but also to do the Empire, I went to Generator, did the artistic producer training program. Christina Lemieux saved my life. All the educators there taught me how to make that project successful. But I just tell artists now, like, if you want to work in this field, you have to make your own work. And and that's an empowering thing. We shouldn't think of it as like, yeah, it can suck, but also you get creative control and you can figure out how you want to spend. You can design your process. You can prioritize funding what matters to you. And you don't have to do the model of 2 weeks rehearsal, 1 week tech. You can design your own model. And so that really allowed me to feed my creativity because I could design a process that would support it.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because you're exactly right. You get to design what you wanna do, and it can the rehearsal process can take however you want it to be. When I was working on
Yeah.
the silent film play, we worked on that for years because we first had to look at what does silent how If you translate that art form to the stage, it's not the
Yeah.
same. So what does it look like? Is it clown? Is it this? Is it
Is
that?
it Buffon?
Is it
Is
bouffant?
it
Like how do you get
yeah,
there? And so we spent years figuring that out before we got into like building a show. So like you can do that in an independent way. You'll never find funding to do that outside of that kind of work.
and I love, like, hearing about your project, like, these are the projects I'm most interested is when an artist has a question, and also an aesthetic question,
Yeah.
like, what does it mean to do a silent film play? Oh, we're not gonna be able to solve that in 2 weeks, like, we need to, like, sit with that and advance it, but ultimately, even your pitch, I'm like, "Well, I wanna see that because I've never seen that before."
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, but I have like, I can open a lot of season announcements and go, "Well, that's literally a remount." Like, okay, you know, and again, I read this interesting article, it came out of the UK, and it was like, "I know we wanna make our bottom lines. I know we need to sell tickets, but if we continue to choose safe programming, we're going to destroy the art form."
That is absolutely true, and I think that the short-sighted view is that the safe choice is the right choice because it will bring
Yeah.
people in. But if it doesn't excite people, it's not gonna bring people in the long term, right?
Yeah,
Like, people want experiences. If the post-pandemic world and watching the things that people are going to in this time where they can make the choice to stay home and have
yeah,
all for as many forms as they want of entertainment at their fingertips.
totally.
What are they willing to pay for? It's an experience. And we have
Yeah.
to be able to give them something they can't get at home and tell them about it. We have to
Yes.
communicate that. And if we can do
Yeah.
that, we can do anything as long as it's exciting.
Yeah, and it's so like, there's so many ways to talk about, like, why does sometimes the theater scene feel, like, limited or strangled or, why don't people know I talked to a lot of friends who are in theater, they're like, "Oh my god, I would love to see something like that, I just don't know about it." We've been talking a lot about how, before when, Now Magazine was a printed, one when Now existed and when it was printed, but this idea that you could now that everything's on our phone and everything is online and everything is algorithms, I used to love just picking up a Now magazine, if I'm waiting for the streetcar or whatever, I'm in a cafe, I'm having a coffee, I'm like, "What's happening?"
Yeah.
Like, "What?" And you can kind of flip through it and be like, "Oh, that sounds cool," or, "I'm gonna go see, oh, that music show." Like, it feels challenging when everything is moved into algorithms to have a sense of community and a sense of culture and a sense of the scene and a sense of a city where things are you're included. And that's like a structural problem. I don't know that artists can necessarily solve, but
I mean, is like the algorithms are the death of community, right? Like the algorithm
yes,
is I mean, I'll be
and can
honest.
solve there.
I
I'm
mean
like,
I mean,
yes, I agree.
full stop, because
Yeah,
it's the death of it was the death of Twitter, it's the death of Instagram. It is the thing that could because your experience online is now different from my experience online.
totally.
There's no community there, and there must be some way that we can break out of this because you're right. The tactile nature of now there are so many things I did back in the day that I never would have found out about if it wasn't for that newspaper, either seeing the cover or sitting in a coffee shop or at a bus stop, flipping through it and be like, there's a what? And just like
Yeah.
deciding that you're going to go to that. Like, I don't know how we get that back again, but we need to.
Yeah. I mean, people were like 2026 is the year of the analog, and I'm like, I can't get back there fast enough. Like, I'm like, let's all read physical books and go to actual restaurants and I think we live in a really expensive city, so I like have to just acknowledge that we are fighting against like a city that is becoming harder and harder to like actually live in. But this is why it feels like going to support local, going to a cafe, going to a piece of theater, going to see an indie art show open at a space. Like those are the experiences that make me want to live in a city. And I feel that for me, what I can do is to try and just like step one, show up. Like if I want the city to have community, to have a feeling of togetherness, I have to like overcome my like, oh, I don't know if I want to commit, or I don't know, I'll see on the day. I'm like, what if I just radically commit to showing up to these events because I want to feel that togetherness, or I want to be in a space where I'm in a community. And if artists are giving me the opportunity to do that, if local restaurants are giving me the opportunity, then what I can do to fulfill that relationship is literally show up.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And on the theater front, I know that there are plenty of people who they think that theater is Mervish prices,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
because that's their experience. They go to Mervis, they go, I can afford to see one show every 2 years. And they don't know that that so many shows are affordable. Like it's not going to break the bank to go see a show at Buddies and Bad Times or Factory Theater or Tarragon or any of the other theaters. And the thing that we're lacking is a way to tell them,
I
and
mean, I'll tell y'all right now, we have $10 tickets, we have $25 tickets, we have $45 tickets, like buy early to get if you want to pay that $10 price, book now. We have $75 tickets. But I think like I want to tell people, honestly, right now, a theater ticket is going to cost you less than Uber eating your dinner.
that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. Cheaper, and also eating out,
It is now
eating
cheaper than
out.
ordering in.
That's right. And eating out at a restaurant, also cheaper. So you buy your tickets. So that's one night that you didn't go out. And then you can go to a restaurant and go to a show. And it ends up being cheaper than doing both.
Doing both. Like it's yeah, it's weird. Like we're trying so hard. Theater costs money. There's this show has 8 actors in it. Which let alone is just exciting because it feels now like you can. It's like, well, you better do a two-hander.
Yeah.
It's so hard. So just the thrill of seeing that many bodies on stage. But I think like it's easy to feel disempowered. It's easy to get apathetic, and Take Rimbaud like talks about that a lot too. Like we're working so hard, we're tired. It's hard, it's hard to make a living. But ultimately, I want to make a piece of art or an experience. Like I am always so much more grateful that I went out and experienced something than staying home on my couch, which inevitably leads to doom scrolling.
No, you're right. And as an introvert, that's my nature. My nature is sitting at home and like,
Right.
not going out. And it takes a lot to make me go out, but
Yeah.
I've never regretted it.
Yeah, I think, like, I don't know that the world has really recovered from also the isolation of the pandemic, and just, like, we normalized a very strange way to live.
We have not even scratched the surface of the psychological damage of to several generations that is the result of the pandemic. Yes, things
Yeah.
were necessary, but we were unprepared for the aftermath. And that's why so many
Mm.
people seem like they're feral. I don't know if you drive. I don't drive very often, but when I go out and I'm
No,
in a
no, no.
car, which is thankfully rare, but like
Yeah.
people are feral. It is
No, they
frightening.
are. Yeah, they're it's intense. It's everyone's, like, at an intensity that is right below the surface, and but I agree, like, I don't think we have. Like, I feel like our cultural response was, like, kind of denial, like, we're like, "Okay, let's just pretend it didn't happen."
That was absolutely the response.
Meanwhile meanwhile, we have people, like, literally unable to know how to, like, kids in classrooms don't really know how to behave, like, we're all used to being able to just, like, walk away or mute or put someone or turn our video off, and I I'm like, art is the thing that can remind us of our humanity.
Full circle. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It
That's
is
it.
it is like all forms of art, but theater will bring you into a room and connect you with people in a way that you're not expecting if you haven't done it before.
No.
My last question for you is you've been working on Take Rimbaud for 12 years
Yeah.
and you're in rehearsal for its production. How does that feel? And what has surprised you about this process?
Well, it feels wild. It feels I almost never know what I'm going to feel at any given time because it unleashes with it all of the memories that I have of all the people I have been in those 12 years. And it works like that for the audience as well. So sometimes it feels like there are just emotional, nostalgic landmines going off. It means from a text perspective, sometimes I am fighting what the play used to be in its construction versus what it needs to be now. So it's like, well, I want to pull this thread, but I don't want to unravel the whole sweater. So how am I going to do that? And I think so. And then that's also very surprising. I think the most surprising thing is that I found this a lot, that like the challenges we have in our art are usually the same challenges we have in our life or as people. And so the play, I think what is surprising and very humbling for me and sometimes deeply uncomfortable is when I go like, oh, the play is hiding from the truth in this moment. The play is hiding behind an idea, or it's hiding behind the thing I wasn't ready to talk about so honestly 12 years ago. Cool. Well, I guess I have to feel and then be willing to simplify and own that I cared so much, or that I actually was deeply hurt by that, or, like these characters care so much and are deeply hurt by. So I think what has been surprising is that the play for all of us, Ted and I have had like a really close friendship and collaboration. So he's also like, oh my gosh, like there's so much of me or who I used to be, or that kid who thought they, we all kind of think we know everything when we actually theater school. And so I think it's been really surprising how much we can actually let go of inside of this process, and how much the play can change as we have changed and still offer something integral. And that I think that's just been really humbling and sometimes just deeply uncomfortable for me.
We're back to discomfort.
Yeah. Back to vulnerability, my favorite.
Full circle.
Yeah. Something that was also fascinating from when we were auditioning, we did some auditions for the play, is we realized that this is a very millennial play. And so we had some like much younger actors come in, and we were like, oh, they haven't lived through, like, it's not that you have to be millennial, but you kind of have to have like lived, you've had to do your coming of age story.
Right.
Like,
This play is not your coming of age story. You have to have already done that.
You have to already do that and be kind of looking back
Right.
and to understand it. And that, I don't think we realized that was true.
Sometimes it's funny, the things that clarify for you. It could be an audition. It could be anything. Like, it's funny how that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and like the millennial kind of anxieties and sarcasm and all this stuff that I was like, some of these jokes, like, if you're 20, you don't know how to say this. Like, just, you don't yet know what this is pointing to,
Yeah.
right? So that was cool to discover.
Yeah. Well, Susanna, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you giving me some time. And this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Stageworthy. I'm going to tell you about who my guest is next week in just 1 second. But first, let me tell you about my Patreon, because I cannot make this podcast without the people who've chosen to back me on Patreon. It costs money to make a podcast. It costs money to have a website. Editing software costs money. I have to host the audio files and distribute them. Creating images for every episode. Also, there are transcripts, and good transcription costs money. And I think it's important to have transcripts for the show. I'm so grateful to the people who've chosen to back this podcast, but we are just covering most of the cost, not even 100% of the cost. If you want to help me to make this show, if you want to help to make this show, please go to patreon.com/stageworthy and become a patron. Patrons get early access to episodes. We have conversations about issues in Canadian theater. The more people who join the Patreon, the more I'm able to offer my patrons. So if you want to be part of that, you want to help me to make this show, Go to patreon.com/stageworthy and become a patron. My guest next week is Blythe Haynes. Blythe is no stranger to Stageworthy. At this time, Blythe will be here to talk about theater in the aftermath of the pandemic and also the filmed version of the Fringe hit An Atlas, a Necktie, and Other Concerns, now available on CBC Gem as And Other Concerns. But next week, we'll be talking to Blythe Haynes. Tune in then.